Hi, it's me, Emmy! And today we're talking about the scariest horror movies ever made. One of my favorite aspects of YouTube review and commentary culture in 2021 is that there's a generally accepted notion that all rankings are subjective and everyone has a right to their opinion. With this in mind, I'd like to assure you that this list is separate from that notion and should be considered both exhaustive and authoritative. Look, I know that a horror movie doesn't need to instill deep, immediate fear to be a good movie or even a good horror movie, but I'm not fucking around with that bullshit today. I'm not your art house film professor, I'm the thoughty TA that's gonna give you the good shit. So I'll be doing my best to avoid spoilers, but I'm not gonna make any promises because these movies are years old. And honestly, you should know better than to expect that much from my content. So if you want surefire douche chills, bundle up, sit back, and get ready for what old Emmy's got in store for you. It's a list of movies. The Descent. The 2005 British horror film, The Descent, investigates what would happen if you and your 5 closest gal pals went spelunking in an unmapped cave system. But soon after a narrow passage collapses behind them, the expedition's organizer admits that rescue won't be coming, because she took them into an unmapped portion of the cave system and no one knows where they are. Claustrophobia and dehydration turn out to be the least of their worries when they figure out, oh no, they're not alone in the cave. I could say a lot about the novelty of 5 women in a horror movie where they aren't catty towards each other and are performing really impressive but unsexy physical feats. But really, what's center stage here is the banality of the mistake that ends up being their downfall. A well-meaning friend just taking it upon herself to organize a group expedition to completely alter the entirety of the group's plans for that day. It's freaky enough in and of itself. The cave dwellers have adapted to living in complete darkness, so they have this kind of disconcerting physicality to them that is just human enough where it will just completely wreck your day. These women behave like you and your friends would behave if you went spelunking and got trapped in a cave system with a colony of blind cannibals with super hearing. Yikes. But even in the midst of battling these aggressive super hearing cannibals, the women have to worry about the basic tenets of survival too. Keep in mind, these are just people with office jobs. And now here they are in a subterranean, unfamiliar, and ultimately unknowable pitch black hellscape. Cool. Just like the friend in the beginning of the movie who really thought she was making an awesome judgment call to really spice up her friend's day. These women are just doing the best they can. It's just a series of judgment calls. And the great thing about The Descent is sometimes those judgment calls are stupid, but sometimes they're the best option. And sometimes your best still just isn't good enough. And ultimately, that is the terror of The Descent. You could do everything right and still get your throat ripped out by a cannibal super hearing mutant. The Babadook. If you're into horror even marginally, you've likely heard of The Babadook. And if you've seen The Babadook and you don't like it, that's okay. You can go away forever. Grief has a strong hold on the horror genre, rightfully so, but no movie encapsulates the chilling loneliness of grief like The Babadook. Initial marketing for the film positioned it as your traditional possessed child narrative. In it, we see a widowed woman caring for her troubled son in the wake of her husband's tragic death. One day, that son brings home a creepy pop-up book called Mr. Babadook. The pop-up book describes a monster, Mr. Babadook, that creeps into victims' consciousness the more they deny that it exists. You can probably see where this is going. As the son's behavior escalates and the mother's reality begins wearing thin, the foundations keeping mother and child together begin deteriorating. Our basest fears surrounding parenting, grief, death, they all take shape, looming over us. The Babadook. And what makes the movie The Babadook so terrifying is how primal and how visceral every scare is. Sometimes the possessed child genre can get a little caught up with religious iconography or haunted house tropes. Whether the filmmakers are subverting our expectations surrounding standard haunted house or possession movies or playing around in Uncanny Valley, this movie is fucking disturbing. And while the creature of the Babadook, of course, is terrifying and as we all know, a verified baddie. It's the visceral, gut-wrenching realization surrounding grief, loneliness, and our roles perpetuating those things that will stay with you and haunt you long after first watch. But also, the Babadook's pretty fucking terrifying. Hereditary. I'm the first to admit, I'm kind of like weirdly protective over Hereditary because of my girl Toni Collette's amazing performance therein. And I don't plan on changing anything about that today. Hereditary first strips you down to your emotional core using one of our most universal human emotions, grief, and then bludgeons you over the head with it. And as you're still quivering, laid bare, just like our Lord and Savior Toni Collette, acting her heart out as matriarch Annie in this movie, you are then struck with the white-hot poker of primal fear as the house and the family that is supposed to protect you. Okay, no, I'm really bad at spoilers, but just like the Babadook, one of the keys to Hereditary's effectiveness is just how successfully it manages to subvert your expectations surrounding possession and haunted house stories. Those can be a little overdone, but Hereditary manages to use tropes from both to make a crisp, terrifying film. For these reasons, I think the scares in Hereditary will hold up for years to come. The Witch. The Witch is so deliciously styled and crafted that there's a lot of debate about whether it even belongs in the horror genre. But how can you call the psychological torment, the gradual breaking of will, the torturous undoing of family bonds as we watch in the most voyeuristic way possible in an otherwise hostile world? How can you say any of these concepts alone, let alone in concert, aren't terrifying? Just your average family in the 17th century New England banished to an isolated forest with their 70 kids under the age of 12 in a totally normal farm. What could go wrong? Who's that goat? The atmosphere is increasingly oppressive. The tree line is absolutely claustrophobic. And this creeping realization that the patriarch's dedication to religious extremism has literally plunged them into their own personal hell, that realization is only the first scare. I promise. The Conjuring. I know. The Conjuring, divorced from its scares, is just not good. It's just not good. It's not good. It's not good, but it created an entire genre within the horror genre of Blumhouse. There's a reason. If you've been following the trajectory of Blumhouse productions, then you'll see that this entire series, specifically The Conjuring, has devolved into the laziest form of thinly veiled Christian propaganda. However, the first film, while still ham-fisted, it still has some of the most substantial scares you'll find in the series and in horror at large. At the end of the day, The Conjuring is a classic haunted house film through and through, but it does it right. It's just the perfect haunted house film executed meticulously. It picks up at the beginning and then it never stops. It knows what it is. That's what you want in a haunted house film. If you're gonna see the same thing that you've seen 37 times, there better be a level of production and a level of sophistication to it that makes it worth the trip. I will say The Conjuring is worth the trip. The Conjuring follows a family of 37 children and one dog who knows better as they move into an ostensibly haunted house that they would not be able to afford today on one income. I don't even get it how they did it in the 70s. Are you seeing a theme with the horror genre and kids? Sinister. Sinister, like The Conjuring, proves that you don't need to take yourself too seriously to provide world-class scares. Boy oh boy, this Sinister film does not take anything seriously, and thank God for it. Ethan Hawke, he's the one leading you on this thrill ride, and I'm just gonna need you to trust him to lead you along. He knows what he's doing. So Ethan Hawke plays a true crime writer who makes this inexplicable choice to move his young family with children into a home where another young family with children was recently murdered so he can write his book about the murders. He's also hoping to uncover the fate of the previous family's unaccounted for daughter who has been missing since the murders. Ethan Hawke investigating creepy projectors in haunted attics, big sweaters, chunky knit. You're gonna laugh, but you're also gonna love it. Alien. Okay, I know, I'm very late to the Alien is so fucking good game. Thank you to all of my good friends, you know who you are, for illuminating me. Aside from Sigourney Weaver totally fucking serving every second of this gosh darn thrill ride, the movie's terrifying before you even get to the alien. Weaver plays Ripley, a by-the-book second-in-command officer on a mining ship which has just received a distress call. Ripley's devotion to the rules actually turns out to be at odds with her superiors, who have the luxury of picking and choosing which rules they abide by. This should strike you as very strange in the context of a militarized hierarchy, right? Aren't you supposed to play by the books? Ripley is just as confused as I am. It is strange that her superiors are suddenly inaccessible, enigmatic, and acting irrationally, trapped in a tin box in space with people whose fate are in their hands like a tiny bird, who will not listen to you, who will not give you answers. That is scary. Literally, everything I described to you is just like the first half hour. And then all hell breaks loose. You think it did. That's what you thought. So I'm probably not spoiling anything for anyone because, like I said, I'm the one that's late to the alien game, but one spoiler is, like, she does save the cat, and everything else is fair game. Wreck. The fuck? The fuck is that? Wreck. The original 2007 film Wreck is a standout of the found footage subgenre, and this praise is exclusive to the Spanish language original foreign film and not to that. The film follows a television reporter and her cameraman who, in a timely twist for the year 2021, are quarantined in an apartment building in the midst of what seems like an outbreak. The reporter, the cameraman, and the rest of the building's tenants are subjected to increasingly violent and vicious horror. In a similar vein to Alien, there are several terrors here totally divorced from the actual outbreak itself. Not the least of which is state authorities subjecting you to these vicious horrors, trapping you in this apartment building, and offering you no explanation or possibility for escape. This film deftly explores themes of state violence, authority, and community action through the lens of a found footage horror film. Less skillful entrees into the found footage genre might have found that their foreign language nature was an additional stumbling block to connect with American audiences. However, Wreck did not have this problem. Even the most subtitle-wary among us will appreciate Wreck for how visceral and universal the scares are. Found footage is often written as the lazy filmmaker's way out for horror, but Wreck pushes back on this. It really does feel authentically like a camera and reporter duo, trying their best to document this in a way that will last. This conceit helps relieve the tension that can sometimes be found in other horror movies, where you start to question why the characters in it would still be filming as the horror unfolds around them. But in Wreck, they have a pretty compelling reason to keep filming. One, a light source. Two, they're still pretty dedicated to their jobs and believe that they have a duty, and it drips from them, this desperation to make these vicious horrors mean something. Ooh, stomach. The Wailing. When I tell you that The Wailing, a South Korean horror film about a mysterious infection... Ooh, another one. Sorry. Call The Wailing an exhausting masterpiece, I really do mean that in the best possible way. It's 2.5 hours long, and it sustains its scares for the entirety of the runtime with no regard for your humanity or anyone else's. What starts as a neo-noir investigative mystery with a bumbling average Joe cop in a small South Korean town descends into sinister madness before you even realize what's happening. It's well worth the time investment. I know this can be kind of a dicey proposition because it is 2.5 hours long, but I suggest you go into it, like the other entries under this list, with as little preliminary knowledge as possible. Believe me when I say that this film does indeed have it all. It has exorcisms, zombies, cults, cop drama, sleuthing, religious zealotry, the death of faith, all of that in the kitchen sink. You will be overwhelmed by the sheer volume of chills, threaded seamlessly together with masterful directing and performances. You won't walk away from The Wailing with any answers or any explanations, but that's the point. The horror of The Wailing is the universe, and the inconsequential smallness of our humanity in the face of inexplicable horrors and abominations. That's the real terror here. The Blair Witch Project.
What the fuck, guy? Why the fuck are you following me around? Where did you get that? I don't give a fuck. Wear it. I don't care. Just leave me alone.
The Blair Witch Project. You've heard of the Blair Witch Project, right? You likely know it, even if you haven't seen it yourself. The Blair Witch Project is by no means the first found footage film, but it is largely credited with the resurgence of popularity of the subgenre in the early aughts. Found footage can be such a powerful medium, and it's riper than ever for mining horror out of the digital age, but it needs to be done right. And it doesn't get righter than the Blair Witch Project. It doesn't get righter than that. I'd feel like a piece of shit if I didn't at least acknowledge that the Blair Witch Project directorial staff got such believable performances out of their actors because they essentially Alfred Hitchcock tortured them in the dead of night. In spite of, or maybe even because of our increased exposure to one another's lives through social media, the Blair Witch Project actually feels more poignant than ever. In 2021, I highly recommend a rewatch, especially Alone in the Dark. It comes at night. One of the central themes of this list in particular is our connection or our lack thereof with other people. Usually this horror is distilled into a monster or an external threat, but It Comes at Night is different. Something is ravaging the planet and you don't fucking know what it is. You think you do. You really, really think you do, but you don't. You don't know what it is. The film plays with this idea that you might know the threat that's lurking. Is it a plague? Is it something that comes at night? It Comes at Night follows a family of three, a mom, a dad, and their teenage son. They are trying to survive in isolation in what we are told to be a hostile and unforgiving outside world. They are happened upon by another family of three, a mom, a dad, and a younger son. And everything's fine. Why wouldn't it be? Everything's fine until it's not. Thanks. Remember to like, comment, and subscribe if you enjoyed this video. Follow me on all of my platforms, including Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, OnlyFans, Fansly, and Pocket Stars. And I'll see you later for more content. Bye!